In the summer of 1977, a small tight-knit fishing community nestled along the rugged coastline of Maine vanished without a trace. For years, families mourned the loss of their loved ones, haunted by silence and uncertainty. Fishermen who once cast their nets into the bountiful sea disappeared in an instant, leaving behind empty boats and shattered lives. The echoes of laughter and shared stories faded, replaced by the cold grip of despair. 30 years passed, and the mystery lingered like a shadow over the water. Then, in a twist that no one could have anticipated, a shocking discovery emerged from the depths of a hidden cave. Their boats, sealed away and untouched, revealed secrets that had long been buried beneath the waves. The tale begins with a mother, Jane Thompson, whose son, David, was among those who vanished that fateful summer day. A skilled fisherman and well-loved member of the community, David was known for his adventurous spirit. He left for work one morning, promising to return by sundown, but he never did. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into years, as Jane clung to the hope that somehow, somewhere, her son was alive. She held on to the memories of his laughter and the warmth of his embrace, believing that if she searched hard enough, she would find him. With each passing year, the authorities shifted their focus, diverting attention to other cases. Jane, however, refused to let her son's memory fade into the background. She would often visit the shoreline, scanning the horizon for any sign of David. Each wave that crashed against the rocks reminded her of the day he left, and each gull's cry echoed her anguish. "What happened to you, David?" she would whisper, the salty air carrying her unanswered questions away. Then, one day in 2007, while combing through old records at the local library, Jane stumbled upon a faded newspaper clipping that reignited the flickering flame of hope within her. The article detailed the discovery of several boats sealed within a cave that had been hidden for decades, untouched since the time of the disappearances. The fishermen's vessels, preserved like time capsules, bore the names of those who had vanished, including David's boat, the Sea Breeze. As Jane read the article, a mix of excitement and dread surged through her. Could this be the breakthrough she had longed for? The authorities had dismissed the case as an accident long ago, attributing the disappearances to the treacherous sea. But Jane's instincts told her otherwise. She felt compelled to investigate, to uncover the truth that had eluded her for so long. The excitement bubbled within her, but so did the fear of what she might find. Why did it take so long for anyone to discover the cave? Jane pondered aloud, her heart racing with the possibilities. What secrets were hidden beneath the surface? These questions lingered in her mind, driving her to seek answers. She reached out to local historians and fellow fishermen, determined to piece together the fragments of a story that had remained untold for decades. As Jane began her quest, she encountered skepticism from the very authorities who once promised to protect her family. Investigators, now long retired, dismissed her claims, viewing them as a painful echo of the past. They suggested that the case was closed, that it was time for her to let go. But Jane was resolute. The discovery of the boats had reignited her determination. She refused to be brushed aside, refusing to accept that her son's fate would remain a mystery forever. With each step she took into the past, Jane uncovered layers of intrigue that revealed a darker side to the community she thought she knew. Secrets began to unfold, suggesting a web of relationships and hidden motives that intertwined the lives of the fishermen in ways she could have never imagined. Whispers of debts owed, feuds that ran deep, and a promise made long ago began to surface, painting a picture of a community at odds with itself. As Jane delved deeper, she unearthed tales of envy and betrayal among the fishermen. The more she uncovered, the more questions arose. Could David's disappearance have been part of something far more sinister than a simple accident at sea? Had he stumbled upon a secret that put his life in jeopardy? With each revelation, the stakes grew higher, and Jane found herself navigating a perilous path, unsure who she could trust. In her search for the truth, Jane became determined to confront those who may have known more than they let on. The fishermen, once her neighbors, now became suspects in a story woven with deception and hidden motives. The suspense thickened as Jane sought out anyone who might have been on the water that day. anyone who could shed light on the events that led to the disappearance of her son and his fellow fishermen. As the investigation gained momentum, Jane faced not only the emotional toll of her quest but also the harsh reality of confronting a community that had spent decades burying its secrets. Each interview left her with more questions than answers, and the fear of what she might uncover weighed heavily on her heart. But Jane was undeterred. The boats in that cave were not just relics of the past. They were a lifeline to the truth, a beacon of hope for families left in the dark. The past had risen from the depths, and Jane was determined to uncover the layers of mystery that surrounded her son's disappearance. Join us in the next part of our series as we follow Jane's journey to seek justice for David and the fishing community that vanished into thin air, as the truth begins to unravel, revealing secrets that lie beneath the surface. What will she discover in her relentless pursuit of answers, and will she find the closure she has long sought? The waves may hold the answers, but will they set her free, or drag her deeper into the abyss? Jane began her investigation by revisiting the small fishing community where her son had lived. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows that whispered of forgotten tales. She approached the old docks where the scent of saltwater mingled with the haunting echoes of laughter and camaraderie. Families had built their lives here, and yet an air of tension cloaked the place like a thick fog. Her first stop was the local tavern, a hub for fishermen and their families where stories were shared over frosty mugs of beer. Jane entered, her heart racing as she scanned the room filled with familiar faces that had once embraced her son. She approached an elderly fisherman, Hank, who had known David well. His weathered hands trembled as she introduced herself, but a flicker of recognition ignited in his eyes. "Hank, do you remember anything about the day David and the others vanished?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, glancing around as if the walls themselves might be listening. "That day was strange," he murmured, avoiding her gaze. "Some of us were out on our boats and there was talk of a storm brewing, but it never hit. Just the usual, you know?" Jane pressed on, feeling the weight of his reluctance. "But did anything unusual happen? Any arguments? Any new faces in the area?" Hank's expression darkened. "We had a stranger come through, a man no one recognized. He was asking questions, looking for something. I don't know, maybe just fishing tips. But he didn't belong here." The mention of the stranger sent a chill through Jane. She had heard rumors of outsiders who had ventured into their waters, but the details had always remained vague. "What did he look like?" she asked, urgency creeping into her tone. "Dark hair, scruffy beard, drove an old truck. Didn't sit right with me, but no one paid him much mind," Hank replied, his voice trailing off as if he were trapped in a memory he wished to forget. Determined to follow this lead, Jane decided to dig deeper into the identity of this stranger. She spent the next few days scouring old newspapers and community records, hoping to find any mention of him. Her nights blurred into early mornings, fueled by coffee and an unyielding drive to uncover the truth. As she pieced together the timeline of events leading up to the disappearance, Jane began to uncover a web of silence and fear woven into the fabric of the community. Names were mentioned in whispers and faces turned away when she inquired further. It was as if the very air around her held secrets that had long been sealed away. One evening, while browsing through old fishing logs at the local library, she stumbled upon a name that sent her heart racing. An entry recorded the disappearance of a boat belonging to a man named Tom Wells, a local fisherman who had vanished just a few weeks before David and the others. The entry noted that Tom had been seen arguing with a newcomer, a man fitting the description Hank had given her. The connection was too coincidental to ignore. Jane felt a surge of adrenaline as she realized that this stranger may hold the key to unlocking the truth about her son's disappearance. But as she followed this new lead, she faced a growing sense of unease. The deeper she delved into the past, the more she sensed that someone was watching her, monitoring her every move. Driven by a newfound sense of purpose, Jane reached out to Tom Wells's family, hoping to gather more information. The conversation was tense, filled with the same air of distrust that had cloaked her previous inquiries. As she spoke to Tom's sister, she noticed a flicker of recognition cross her face, followed by a swift retreat into silence. With each unanswered question, the mystery deepened, and Jane's resolve hardened. But she knew she was treading dangerous waters. The truth was beginning to surface, but the ocean held secrets that could just as easily drown her as set her free. With each new lead, Jane found herself not only racing against time, but also against forces that had long since conspired to keep the past buried. As she prepared to confront the shadowy figures lurking in the community, Jane steeled herself for the revelations that lay ahead. The truth was out there, but it came at a price, and she was ready to pay it. Little did she know, the confrontation that awaited her would change everything she thought she knew. Jane's determination led her to the small library that housed the archives of the town, a place where whispers of the past lingered in the dust. She scoured through old newspapers, searching for any mention of Tom Wells or the boats that had disappeared along with the fishermen. Each article she read was a painful reminder of lives interrupted, families shattered. As days turned into weeks, a pattern began to emerge. There were mentions of sightings of the fishermen, of strange boats seen at unusual hours, and whispers of a secret fishing operation that had been rumored but never confirmed. Jane's heart raced as she pieced together a timeline, the threads of the past beginning to weave a disturbing narrative. One evening, while combing through a particularly old issue, she stumbled upon a photograph that froze her in place. It was grainy and faded, but there, unmistakable among a group of men, was Tom Wells, standing beside a man she recognized from her conversations with locals. His name was Charlie Jenkins, a figure mentioned in hushed tones, known for his connections to the underground fishing trade. Jane's instincts screamed at her to dig deeper. Who was Charlie Jenkins, and what did he have to do with Tom's disappearance? She learned that Jenkins was notorious for his unscrupulous dealings, rumored to have ties to smugglers and a network that preyed on the vulnerable. Feeling a mix of fear and resolve, Jane arranged to meet with Charlie under the pretense of seeking information about the fishing community. As she drove to the meeting point, a secluded dock known for its secrecy, her thoughts were a whirlpool of anxiety and determination. When she arrived, the air was thick with tension. Charlie was waiting, his posture relaxed, but his eyes held a predatory glint. The conversation began innocently enough, but Jane could sense the underlying menace. As she inched closer to the truth, probing about Tom and the day of the incident, Charlie's demeanor shifted. He leaned in, his voice low and gravelly, warning her to be careful about digging up the past. The threat was veiled, but unmistakable. In that moment, Jane realized she was not just uncovering a mystery. She was walking a tightrope over a chasm of danger. Fearing for her safety, yet emboldened by the conviction of her quest, Jane decided to dig deeper into Charlie Jenkins's life. She began to explore his connections, speaking to those who knew him, navigating the fine line between curiosity and caution. As the pieces began to align, Jane found herself grappling with a chilling possibility. Could Charlie Jenkins have been involved in something far more sinister than mere smuggling? What if he had played a role in the disappearance of her brother and his friends? The investigation was becoming a tight knot of suspense, and with each new revelation, Jane felt the weight of the past pressing down upon her. She was on the verge of uncovering something that could shatter the fragile peace of the community and expose the dark underbelly hidden beneath the waves. But as she drew closer to the truth, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not alone in her pursuit. Shadows lurked in the corners of her investigation, and somewhere, someone was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The confrontation loomed, and Jane knew that soon she would have to face the very heart of the darkness that had consumed so many lives. The truth was within reach, but it would not come without a cost. As the ocean roared in the distance, Jane braced herself for the impending storm. The pressure was mounting as Jane delved deeper into the tangled web of secrets that had long shrouded the town. Her inquiries led her to local historians, fishermen, and even old town records, each thread revealing whispers of a fishing community that had thrived until it abruptly vanished. As she pieced together the fragmented history, she learned of a feud that had simmered beneath the surface, a rivalry between fishermen that had escalated into something far more dangerous. With the chilling realization that Charlie Jenkins had ties to both the missing men and this feud, Jane couldn't help but feel the noose tightening around her investigation. She uncovered accounts of illicit activities, rumors of smuggling routes, and clandestine meetings held under the cover of darkness. But what chilled her to the bone was a name that kept surfacing, an enigmatic figure known only as the Captain. Those who spoke of him did so in hushed tones, their fear palpable. Determined to find answers, Jane pressed on. She began to connect the dots, tracking down old friends of Charlie who might provide insights into his life before the disappearance. Each conversation felt like walking a tightrope, a delicate balance between seeking the truth and awakening old ghosts. In a chance encounter, she met a former deckhand who had worked with Charlie years ago. He was reluctant to speak at first, glancing over his shoulder as if afraid to be overheard. But as Jane pressed him for details, he began to unravel a story of betrayal, greed, and unexpected alliances that challenged everything she thought she knew. "I never thought Charlie would get mixed up in something like this," he muttered, his voice trembling with the weight of unspoken fears. "But there was a deal, something big. I don't know what it was about, but it was enough to make people disappear." As these chilling revelations sank in, Jane felt a knot of dread in her stomach. The more she uncovered, the more it became clear that Charlie Jenkins was not just a simple fisherman. He was part of a larger, darker operation that involved far more than fishing. Yet, with every new lead, Jane faced mounting resistance. Some townsfolk were quick to dismiss her inquiries, while others warned her to leave well enough alone. It was as if a protective barrier surrounded the truth, a collective silence that spoke volumes. But Jane's determination only grew, fueled by the memory of her brother and his friends. She wouldn't let fear dictate her actions. As she prepared for her next steps, she discovered an unexpected ally, a retired detective who had once worked on the case. His insights and experience would be crucial as they pieced together the clues, and Jane felt a flicker of hope. However, as their partnership began to unfold, Jane sensed a growing unease. Someone was watching their every move, and the stakes were rising. The shadows that lurked in her investigation were no longer just a feeling. They had become a tangible threat. As Jane and the detective honed in on the identity of the Captain, they prepared for a confrontation that could shatter the fragile trust that had held the community together for decades. The deeper they dug, the more they realized that the truth could very well reveal secrets that would alter the fabric of their lives forever. With the storm brewing outside, Jane knew that soon she would have to face the chilling reality of what lay ahead. The pieces were finally coming together, but at what cost? As she stood on the precipice of revelation, the weight of the past loomed large, and the confrontation that awaited her was poised to unveil a darkness that had been hidden for far too long. As Jane and the retired detective delved deeper into the layers of their investigation, they stumbled upon a series of old, unsolved cases that bore striking similarities to her mother's disappearance. Each case had its own haunting story, but what linked them was the presence of a figure known only as the Captain. This enigmatic character had been rumored to have connections to local law enforcement and a network of unsavory individuals. In a dimly lit diner, Jane and the detective pored over newspaper clippings and police reports, their hearts racing as they uncovered a pattern of disappearances that spanned decades. The realization hit them like a bolt of lightning. Jane's mother was not just a victim, she was one of many. But then, just as the pieces began to fit, they received an anonymous tip that sent a chill down their spines. A voice on the other end of the line whispered, "You're getting too close." The call ended abruptly, leaving Jane shaken but more determined than ever to uncover the truth. As they continued to search for leads, Jane uncovered an old photograph tucked away in her mother's belongings. It depicted her mother standing beside a man who bore an uncanny resemblance to the sketch of the Captain. The revelation struck Jane like a thunderclap. Her mother had known this man. The implications were staggering. Had her mother been involved in something dangerous? Or had she stumbled upon a secret that was meant to remain hidden? Jane felt a mix of fear and resolve. She had to confront this new reality head-on, even as the walls around her began to close in. Days turned into nights as Jane and the detective pieced together this tangled web of relationships. They reached out to former associates of her mother, but each conversation only deepened the mystery. Some were reluctant to speak, others terrified, their eyes darting around as if the shadows could come alive at any moment. Then came a breakthrough. A former friend, trembling with fear, revealed that her mother had been in possession of sensitive information regarding the captain and his illegal operations. The friend recounted a fateful night when her mother had confided in her, saying she had to make a choice, stay silent or expose the truth. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Jane felt the ground shift beneath her as she realized her mother was entangled in a treacherous game of power and deceit. The shadows of the past were not just lurking, they were alive and watching her every move. Just when Jane thought she was getting closer to uncovering the truth, she found herself standing at a crossroads. Who could she trust? And would unearthing her mother's legacy lead to justice, or would it put her own life at risk? As she stared into the abyss of the secrets that surrounded her mother's disappearance, Jane knew one thing. She was in this fight for the long haul. The truth was dark and complex, woven into the very fabric of her community, and it was up to her to unravel it, no matter the cost. With the weight of her mother's secrets pressing down on her, Jane felt both empowered and terrified. The former friend's revelation forced her to confront the specter of the captain more directly. Who was this figure, shrouded in whispers and shadows, and what role had he played in the disappearance of her mother and the entire fishing community? Determined to forge ahead, Jane began to dig deeper. She visited the local library, poring over old newspapers and archives, desperate to find any mention of the captain or his operations. Days turned into weeks as she combed through yellowed pages, her heart racing at every mention of mysterious boats and unexplained disappearances. Each article she read felt like a breadcrumb leading her further down a perilous path. But Jane was not alone in her quest. A small group of concerned citizens began to rally around her, inspired by her determination to seek the truth. Together, they began to piece together the fragmented history of the town, uncovering layers of corruption that had been hidden beneath the surface for decades. They learned of local fishermen who had vanished, their boats found adrift with no sign of struggle. The echoes of those lost lives haunted Jane, fueling her resolve. Yet as her investigation gained traction, so too did the tension in the community. Whispers turned to gossip, and Jane found herself facing increasing hostility. Some residents warned her to back off, claiming that digging into the past would only bring trouble. Others, however, offered hushed encouragement, sharing their own suspicions about the local authorities' involvement in a cover-up. Despite the escalating pressure, Jane pressed on, her instincts driving her to a dark corner of the harbor where old, rusted boats lay abandoned. It was here that she made a chilling discovery, a hidden cache of documents tied to the captain. They detailed transactions, names, and locations that hinted at a much larger operation than she had anticipated. As she pieced together the puzzle, the implications of her findings became clear. The captain was not just a local fisherman. He was a kingpin in a web of illicit activity that reached beyond the small town, drawing in unsuspecting victims along the way. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. The very fabric of her community had been woven with lies, and now it was time to confront them. But just as Jane began to organize her evidence for a confrontation with the authorities, a shadow fell across her path. A menacing figure appeared at the edge of her vision, someone she recognized from her past. It was a local businessman, a friend of her father's, who had always seemed too interested in the town's affairs. The look on his face told her everything she needed to know. She was being watched. Her heart raced as she realized the stakes had grown dangerously high. With her mother's legacy at risk and her own safety in jeopardy, Jane had to decide. Would she push forward and confront the shadows that haunted her community, or would fear dictate her next move? In the dim light of the harbor, she took a deep breath, preparing for the confrontation that was all but inevitable. The truth was out there, but it was buried deep within the dark waters, and Jane was determined to bring it to the surface, no matter the cost. The question lingered in the air. Who would be waiting for her when she finally unveiled the truth? As Jane stood at the harbor, A mix of determination and trepidation coursed through her veins. The weight of the past pressed heavily on her shoulders, yet she knew that she could not turn back. Every moment spent in uncertainty was a moment lost for those who had vanished. The local businessman had always been a fixture in the community, his charm masking an unsettling intensity. Jane recalled the stories whispered among townsfolk about him. How he had prospered while others struggled, how his connections seemed to shield him from scrutiny. Her instinct screamed that he held secrets that could unlock the mystery of her mother's disappearance. With a resolve she didn't know she possessed, Jane decided to confront him. She gathered her notes, evidence of the inconsistencies she had uncovered, and steeled herself. She would find him at his office, a modest building that had served as the nerve center of his enterprises. As she drove through the narrow streets, memories of her childhood flooded her mind. The laughter of friends, the summer nights spent fishing under a blanket of stars, all shadowed by the looming unanswered questions. Could this man have known what happened to her mother? Could he have played a role in the cover-up? Arriving at the office, Jane stepped inside and was greeted by the faint smell of stale coffee and the clatter of keyboards. The man looked up from his desk, a smile stretching across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Jane," he said, his voice smooth like silk. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need to talk to you about the boats," she stated, her voice steady despite the turbulence in her heart. "About what happened in '77. The smile faltered for a brief moment. And in that flicker, Jane saw the mask slip. "Those were dark times," he replied, his tone shifting. "The past is best left buried." Jane pressed on, recounting the details she had pieced together: the cave, the discovery, the community's silence. With each word, she felt the tension thickening in the air, a palpable shift as he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed defensively. "You're digging up old ghosts, Jane," he warned, his voice dropping an octave. "You don't want to go down that path." The threat was unmistakable, yet Jane couldn't back down now. "If you know something, you need to tell me. My mother deserves that much." For a moment the room was heavy with silence and Jane's heart raced, hoping he would yield. But then, his expression hardened. The facade of camaraderie shattered. "You really think you're ready for the truth? Some things are better left undiscovered." As fear clawed at her insides, a realization dawned. He was not just a businessman, he was a gatekeeper, guarding secrets that could unravel the very fabric of the community. In that moment, Jane understood the stakes had risen. She would have to tread carefully, navigating a treacherous web of power and deception. His words echoed in her mind, a warning laced with menace. Stepping back, she knew she had to reassess her approach. There was more to this man than she had initially believed, and the truth was slipping further from her grasp. As she left the office, adrenaline surged through her, mingling with the dread of what she might uncover. The investigation was far from over, and Jane felt the weight of impending confrontation looming ever closer. She had to find allies, others who might share her quest for justice. But as she drove away, a chilling thought crept into her mind. Was she truly ready to face whatever dark secrets lay beneath the surface? With a fire ignited within her, Jane was determined to continue her search. The community may have turned a blind eye, but she would not falter. The journey to uncover the truth was fraught with peril, and the next chapter of this mystery was about to unfold. As Jane drove through the narrow, winding roads of the coastal town, she reflected on the complexities of the life she had unearthed. The businessman, once just a suspect in her mind, now loomed larger than life, a shadow over the lives of those who had vanished. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Arriving at the local diner, a hub for gossip and whispered conversations, she took a deep breath and stepped inside. The familiar smell of coffee and fried food enveloped her, but the atmosphere felt different. Eyes turned, conversations quieted, and she could sense the weight of the community's collective grief and unease pressing down on her. With a determined resolve, Jane approached the counter where an older woman named Ruth served breakfast. Ruth had known the fishermen who disappeared, their faces etched into her memory like the lines on her weathered hands. Jane hoped Ruth could shed some light on the dark corners of the past that still haunted the town. "Ruth, can I ask you a few questions?" Jane ventured, her voice steady but urgent. Ruth glanced around, her eyes narrowing as if weighing the risk of speaking freely. "You know it's not safe to poke around those old stories, dear," she whispered, her voice barely above the hum of the diner. "I have a lead, something that might tie everything together." Jane pressed, pulling out the photo she had discovered, the one that had reignited her search. Ruth's expression shifted, recognition flashing in her eyes. "That photo, it belongs to him, doesn't it?" Ruth hesitated, glancing at the door before leaning closer. "You should know there are people who still don't want that past disturbed. They're watching." Jane's heart raced. She needed to press on but felt the weight of Ruth's warning. "I'm not backing down. These families deserve answers," she insisted, her voice steady but pleading for understanding. Ruth nodded slowly, the lines of worry deepening on her forehead. "All right, but tread lightly. He's not the only one who knows what happened that night. There are others, too, with secrets buried deeper than the ocean." With newfound determination, Jane left the diner, her mind racing. Who were these others? What secrets were they hiding? That night, Jane combed through the information she had gathered, piecing together a timeline. The fishermen had been last seen gathering their gear at the docks, but the next day, they were gone without a trace. It wasn't just their boats that had vanished. Their lives, hopes, and dreams had been swallowed whole by the sea of silence that followed. But the discovery of the boats in the cave had opened a door, revealing something sinister lurking beneath the surface. What if the fishermen's disappearance was not an accident but a calculated event, linked to a web of corruption that ran deeper than the waters they fished? The thought sent a chill down her spine. She needed to confront the businessman again, to push him harder, but she also needed to gather allies, people who had lost loved ones and shared her thirst for justice. As she plotted her next move, Jane received an unexpected call. It was a local historian, someone who had been researching the town's maritime history for years. "I've heard you're looking into the disappearances," he said cautiously. "Meet me at the old lighthouse tomorrow. There's something you need to see." Her pulse quickened. This could be the breakthrough she needed, a key to unlocking the truth. But she also felt the weight of the warning Ruth had given. The night was dark, shadows creeping across the landscape as Jane prepared for the meeting. As she stared out at the ocean, she felt the restless waves mirror her own turmoil. What awaited her at the lighthouse could very well change everything. The confrontation was on the horizon, and Jane steeled herself for the truth she was about to uncover, one that would reveal the hidden connections between the town, the businessman, and the unsolved mystery that had lingered for decades. With dawn approaching, so too did the promise of revelation, and Jane knew she was ready to face whatever awaited her in the shadows. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Jane made her way to the old lighthouse, a structure long abandoned and cloaked in whispers of the past. Each step echoed her determination, her heart racing with the possibilities that lay ahead. The salty breeze tousled her hair, and she could almost hear the cries of those who had vanished, urging her on. Upon reaching the lighthouse, Jane spotted the historian leaning against the weathered stone, his eyes scanning the waves as if searching for ghosts. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I've been following the stories of your family and the others for years. There's something you need to know about the fishing boats." Jane listened intently as he explained that he had uncovered records suggesting that the boats found sealed in the cave were not just abandoned, but had been deliberately hidden. "There was a storm that year," he continued, "but these boats, they were moved after the storm. Someone wanted them out of sight." Intrigued, Jane pressed for more details. "Who would do that? Why keep it secret for so long?" The historian hesitated, casting a wary glance around as if the shadows themselves might overhear. "There's talk of a smuggling operation that ran through this town, and some believe that the fishermen stumbled upon something they shouldn't have. The local authorities were involved, perhaps even complicit. It's a web of lies and betrayal." Each word hit Jane like a wave crashing against the shore. The pieces of her mother's disappearance, once scattered and unrecognizable, began to coalesce into a dark and foreboding picture. "Do you think my mother was part of this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't say for certain," he replied, But the more I dig, the more I realize how deep the corruption runs. If the fishermen knew too much, it could explain their disappearance, and why no one wanted to find them. As they talked, Jane felt a chilling sense of urgency. She needed to see those boats for herself to understand their secrets, but the historian cautioned her. It's not safe to go alone. If there's a cover-up, those involved won't want you poking around. Determined, Jane resolved to gather her allies, Ruth, the widow of one of the missing men, and a few other family members who shared her quest for truth. But before she could act, a shadow fell over them. A figure emerged from the shadows of the lighthouse, a familiar face she had not anticipated to see. It was the businessman, the one who had seemed so helpful, now standing before her with an unsettling smile. "What are you doing here, Jane?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. "This place is dangerous. You shouldn't be alone." Jane felt a knot tighten in her stomach. His presence was no coincidence. "I was just leaving," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Not so fast," he replied, stepping closer. "There are things about your mother's case that might be better left untouched." In that moment, Jane understood the confrontation she had prepared for was not just about uncovering the past. It was about standing her ground against a man who had woven himself into the very fabric of this mystery. The walls of the lighthouse echoed with the weight of their unspoken history, and Jane knew that the next step would force her to confront not just the truth of her mother's fate, but the sinister forces that had kept it hidden for so long. The time for secrets was over, and Jane was ready to face the darkness head-on. As Jane stood resolute, the tension in the air thickened. The businessman, once a trusted ally, now revealed himself as a key player in a web of deception that had ensnared her mother. With each word exchanged, the chilling reality became clearer. The facade of kindness had masked a darker truth. Her mother had stumbled upon illegal activities that threatened powerful interests, and rather than protect her, the businessman had orchestrated her disappearance to safeguard his empire. In the face of this revelation, Jane's heart raced. With the evidence she had collected, she confronted him with the truth. The photographs, the hidden connections, and the testimonies of those too afraid to speak out. The businessman's composure cracked as he realized that Jane had unearthed the very secrets he believed buried forever. The confrontation escalated, but Jane stood firm, refusing to back down. It would take weeks of relentless determination, but the truth could no longer be suppressed. Authorities, once dismissive of Jane's claims, were forced to re-examine the case. The businessman, now backed into a corner, was finally apprehended. As the full extent of his involvement was unveiled, the community was shaken to its core. But for Jane, the fight was not just about justice, it was also about closure. Standing in front of her mother's grave, she felt a bittersweet sense of peace wash over her. The painful scars of loss would never fully heal, but the truth had emerged, illuminating the darkness that had loomed over her family for so long. The case had revealed profound truths about trust, betrayal, and the lengths one would go to protect their secrets. Jane's journey taught her that justice is not merely the punishment of the guilty, but also a reclamation of the narrative that had been stolen from her. As the sun set behind the lighthouse, casting long shadows on the ground, Jane whispered a promise to her mother. "You are not forgotten. Your truth has been spoken, and it will echo through time." And as we reflect on this harrowing story, we are reminded that the quest for truth is often fraught with peril, yet it is a quest worth pursuing. For in the end, it is the truth that sets us free. What would you do if you were faced with a secret that could change everything?